It's time for Bring Your Own Device. That's right, BYOD, we are there. And now we're going to start off by talking about why we would even want to use BYOD or allow users to bring their endpoints in and some things that we should take into consideration. So let's get started. So bring your own device, good old BYOD. And of course, this is when we allow our users to bring their own personal devices in to the office and connect them to our networks. Now, maybe when they come in, we have policies in place because we've got to have policies in place around this. Everybody knows that. And we'll talk about that. But maybe we only allow them internet only. So that way they can bring their devices in, they can connect to an internet only wireless SSID, and away they go with internet. So they could then use a VPN on their endpoint to connect back into the office. So sure, they have internet access, but that does allow them to connect in to the office with VPN. So hey, that's a solution. Or maybe we want to allow their endpoint directly onto the network, whether it be a wired or wireless, doesn't matter. But maybe we want them to have access to our internal network so that they can use that device to work with internally. However, with that does come risk. So think about that. And the thing is, we might want to install like an MDM agent, a mobile device management, or even our Cisco Secure client on the device as part of posturing that is in the next section of the course. But the idea is maybe we want some type of agent installed, and that's really the key here, an agent on the device to give us some type of admin level access. And really what this is to do is to help enforce some security settings, because that's really what we're wanting to do, because that's going to help us to reduce the risk of allowing personal devices onto the network. So why did we do this? Why even use BYOD? It seems like such a hassle. Let's talk about this. Well, really, when it comes to BYOD, it is shown to increase productivity. Hey, users are used to their own devices, right? They use them at home all the time, and they're not being forced upon them some other device that they really don't like to use. So again, this is shown to increase productivity. Also, IT doesn't provision and manage as many endpoints, so that reduces some of the workload on IT. Also, this goes back to increased productivity, and that's because of the user comfort level with those devices. And it just makes for more of a productive environment, and that's why BOD is actually a thing, because if none of this was true, then there would be no use case for using BYOD. So before configuring BYOD, we have to identify the policies around it. And I'm not talking about policies within ICE, but really I'm talking about policies within the organization. There have to be policies around BYOD, such as things like who is allowed to use BYOD or bring in their devices, because is it everybody or is it only certain people? Then we need to consider access level. So what level of access do these BYOD devices have? And we're going to talk more about that, of course. And then maybe also what type of devices are allowed in. So are we only supporting Windows computers? So as far as laptops, we only doing Windows. We're not supporting Linux or Mac or anything like that. Maybe it is only Windows. Or maybe we also allow tablets and phones as well. So we just need to come up with that as an organization so that we can know this information, and then we can take that and we can put it into ICE as our policy sets. That's right. That's where we're going to enforce the organizational policies within ICE. So something else to consider, how, I'm going to put down here for onboarding. How are we going to onboard these devices? Because there's a couple different options, of course, but really here we're looking to minimize risk. We really want to take as much risk out of the equation as possible. So at this point, again, I had mentioned MDM or the Cisco Secure client. Either one of those might be necessary in order for a device to be allowed into the internal network. Because again, with these, we're going to be able to gain insights about the device. And really, that's going to help us to judge whether we should allow that device onto the internal network or not. So now let's talk about two flavors of BYOD. And these are just kind of generic flavors here. And what we're talking about is compliant devices versus non-compliant devices. So let's start with non-compliant. So this is an endpoint that we can't verify to be compliant. So what is compliance? Let's talk about that. We should probably start with that, right? So some of the things when it comes to is something compliant or not, maybe we want to make sure the operating system is up to date or running a certain level of OS. Also, service pack level within the OS. We can check that as well. Also, the endpoint protection. Does it have an endpoint protection solution installed? Maybe it's Cisco AMP, or maybe it's Microsoft Defender, or something else. It doesn't matter. Is it installed and is it up to date? Also, is the hard drive encrypted? So it's all these types of things that we want to check for to see if something is compliant. And there's much more that we can filter by and check for, of course, but these are just a couple of the more common things we're scanning for and checking for. So if a device is found to be non-compliant, maybe they get internet-only access. All right, that would make sense because they're going to be in a separate VLAN, so they are segmented from our internal network and they just have internet access. But if we're able to determine compliance, and again, that's going to require that we have like our Cisco secure client or an MDM solution of some sort in play here, because we have to be able to see into the device, into the operating system, to see if these things are enabled or up to date or whatever it is. But once we identify that something is compliant, it's at that point they can gain access into the internal network. So you'll see the difference here. And we're going to get into all of this. So this is just kind of getting you to think about compliant versus non-compliant and the idea of different levels of access for BYOD. So when it comes to onboarding, we do have some options here. All right, so first off, we could let the users do it themselves. Now, if we were to do this to onboard the devices, we would need to make sure that the individuals who are in this group have enough tech savvy that they can do this. They know how to go in and connect to networks and maybe bounce their network adapter or enable certain settings on it, whatever it might be. So that is option one, but then we also have option two. Now, option two is allowing ICE to kind of do a wizard, if you will. We'll say Ice Wizard. Now, the Ice Wizard makes me think of the Christmas movies that are those stop anime kind of movies with Rudolph and the abominable snowman. Yeah, so you got your Ice Wizard. So this is going to basically assist our users with registering their devices, because there's lots of things that happen when a device is registered. For example, there are certificates involved, there are settings involved, of course, and we need all of these things, and there's several steps in here to happen. Now, this nice wizard, we'll see it in action later on, allows this to happen, but the user does have to click through the wizard and also install a software package and go ahead and run it. And it's super simple, and we'll see it, but that is required. So you got a couple different options. Of course, this one, we're going to have to make sure that, again, they are somewhat tech savvy. Whereas over here, they just need to have a basic understanding of how to go through a wizard. It's pretty straightforward there. All right, so that wraps up our kind of why we would want to use BYOD and the idea of different levels of it. So next up, we're going to discuss the BYOD flow for onboarding endpoints. So I'll see you there shortly. Thanks for watching, and subscribe here to get the latest from CBT Nuggets. And if you're interested in IT career or learning more about IT in general, hey, swing by cbtnuggets.com and sign up for a free trial.